One question, time-wise, if you want questions, then stop me after 45 minutes and say, Brad, you've got 5 minutes left. If you don't want questions, then stop me at 55 minutes and tell me I've got 5 minutes left. Okay?
Yep.
Good. Okay. Let's get rid of this thing. It says continue.
We'll start the meeting, Brad. Sorry. We'll start the meeting. Thank you. So, gentlemen, good morning. So we'll start the meeting. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to our June virtual coffee meeting. I was going to mention Tony Benz. Dick beat me to it. It's very sad news, but let's hope for a good outcome. We'll hear about that later when Gillian lets us know after the procedure. So could we welcome Brad Ashton, who's our speaker today. He will be hopefully lifting the mood and our spirits with his talk, The Job of a Lifetime.
Right.
Now for this meeting, we'll enjoy the talk first, as usual, and then we'll go through our parish notices afterwards. And that will allow Brad to leave and get on writing some more jokes. So may I ask Dick to introduce Brad as our speaker today, please.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. Our speaker today is Brad Ashton. Brad is a Londoner, born in the 1930s, and did his national service in the RAF. And after the RAF, became involved with.
You've done a lot of research, but let's forget that and get straight on. Because the bigger you build me up, the better I've got to be. So let me just go straight into my talk, okay?
Okay.
If you don't mind. Okay.
Right, so. You are. And so I'll hand you over then to Brad and let him tell you.
Thank you very much indeed. Fine. As you heard, my name is Brad Ashton. If you're expecting Brad Pitt, you've been conned. But today I'll talk about some of the stars I used to work with. I used to with Tommy Cooper, Les Dawson, Dick Emery, Frankie Howard, Bruce Forsyth, Bob Monkhouse, David Frost, Graham Marks. I'll talk about some of them and some backstage stories, and hopefully give you some facts you didn't know before that you can talk about afterwards. Okay, but before I start, let's get the commercial over with. I've written 5 books. This is my latest. Can you see the title of that?
Yeah.
Stand Up and Be Laughed At. Now, I'm not showing you this because I want you to go out and buy one. You buy as many as you want. Okay, but on the back, it's the back that I want to particularly see. Can you see what that says?
Yes, Bought by Ken Dodd.
Bought by Ken Dodd, yeah, exactly. Because Ken and I were friends for about 30 years, only because I wouldn't work with him. The man was a maniac. But it leads me into talking about Ken Dodd. Okay, because Ken Dodd, as you may know, was the most sought-after comedian in the whole country. Yeah, come and face me. Go. Okay, now you're facing me, I can talk. Ken Dodd was the most sought-after comedian in the whole country, mostly with the tax people, because as you may know, he owed £1 million in tax evasion, right? He said it's my own fault. He said, because when I joined the profession, income tax was a shilling in the pound. I thought it still was. But after the court case, he did capitalize on it because he used to introduce himself as, I'm Ken Dodd, comedian, raconteur, and failed accountant. But what I thought was funny was that before the court case, he took advice from Lester Piggott. Now, Lester Piggott, as you may know, got done for £3 million and actually spent a year in prison for it. But he gave some advice to Ken. He said, the first thing you do, Ken, is you go to your doctor and say you want a certificate to say you've got a bad heart. Because once you've got that, if they do put you in prison, you'll be in the hospital wing where you won't have to mix with the other convicts, which is obviously what Lester Piggott himself had done. But the other bit of advice he gave me, he said, well, insist that the court case be held up in Liverpool, where everybody knows you and loves you, and with a bit of luck, you can bribe the jury. Which is probably what he did, because he got away with it. But why I think it was funny that he took advice from Lester Piggott was, as I said, Lester Piggott got done for £3 million. And when he realized that the tax people were onto him, he said, all right, I hold up my hands. I admit I owe you £3 million. And I'll write you out a check for it right now, which he did on an account they didn't even know about. getting back, getting back to Ken. Ken Dodd had one word missing from his vocabulary, and that word was goodbye. Because once he had the audience in the palm of his hand, he could not let go. He'd go on and on and on. I went to see him in a show in Bournemouth, which should have finished at 10:30. It finished at 1:20. He went on and on. I think one of the funniest lines I heard came from comedian Bernie Clifton, who just before Ken's court case said, if Ken gets 2 years, he'll do 4. Lovely line. One guy I really enjoyed working with would be Les Dawson. Les was a lovely, lovely man. And part of his act, if you remember, was playing the piano badly. Right? He says he learned that while working in a brothel in Paris, his mind wasn't fully on what he was doing. That was what he said. The actual truth of the matter, of course, is that if you do play a tune which is within copyright, in other words, with 70 years of it being published, and the audience have to pay to see or hear you play it, then you've got to pay a fee to the Performing Rights Society. However, if you change every 4th note, you don't have to. That's why every 4th note he played was a bum note and saved himself a fortune. I had lunch once with Les in a Chinese restaurant in Leeds, and he spent 20 minutes talking to the waiter in Chinese. He spoke 5 languages. He said, but the public must never know this. They think I'm that well educated, I wouldn't be one of them. And he was determined to be one of the public, as it were. So, a lovely man. But if, as a comedy writer, if you're writing for a comedian that has a definite persona, you're halfway home, because the audience know what they're thinking, how they react. So what you've got to do is put words in their mouth or put them in an alien situation, and you've got your comedy. Let's take, say, Tommy Cooper. Tommy Cooper had a definite persona. His persona was that he was an idiot. And it worked extremely well because Tommy Cooper was an idiot. And I found that out one day. And he said to me, he said, Brad, he said, you're Jewish. He said, a friend of mine's son is getting bar mitzvah. And they've invited me along to the synagogue and they expect me to say something funny. Can you give me something funny I can say? I said, well, when we Jewish men go to synagogue, we wear a skull cap, which is called a couple, K-U-P-E-L, couple. So you went along to synagogue, and the man outside said, any man that comes in here has to have a couple. So I went and had a couple, time I came back, it was all finished. He said, God love, didn't understand it, had nothing up here. But what he did have, Tommy, was a reputation for being one of the stingiest men in show business. And there's a joke they tell about him, which I'm sure is based on truth, in which he had a taxi ride. And at the end of the ride, he paid the driver and said, look, have a drink on me, and put something in his top pocket, which was a tea bag. Tommy, I mean, when I did a series with him for Thames Television, we always supplied props for his magic, and he refused to use them. He said, I don't trust your props. The only props I trust go from a magic shop in Wandsworth. And so all the props we bought were from this magic shop in Wandsworth, which we later found out was owned by his brother. It's typical Tommy. And Tommy was a big drinker. In fact, every year he went for 6 weeks to Champions to try out. It's true. But my wife and I were actually in the audience the night that Tommy died. It was at the Her Majesty's Theatre, a TV show. And the reason we were there is because the compere of the show was Jimmy Tarbuck, and I was writing all Jimmy's material at the time. And if you remember the show, Tommy was no longer topping the bill. He was halfway down the bill, and topping the bill on that show was American singer Howard Keel. And I had written a complete page of banter between Jimmy Tarbuck and Howard Keel to do before Howard's first number. I wasn't there for in that page of banter, there was possibly about 8 laughs. And if you're writing for Americans, and I've written for a lot of Americans, they don't say it's a funny line or it's a funny scene. They say, oh, that's cute. I like that. It's a cute line. And they use the word cute a lot. Well, I wasn't there for the show, for the rehearsal, that is. And I turned up just before the show. And on Howard Keel's script, I noticed against each of the funny lines, he put the word cute. And I was very happy about that, except that it wasn't in the show at all. And after the show finished, I said to the producer, Kenneth Carter, what happened? He said, well, Howard Keel refused to do it. I said, why? He said, well, he's in his dressing room, ask him. I said, Howard, what happened? He said, well, first of all, he said, I'm a singer, not a comedian. Secondly, he said, I didn't like the routine at all. I said, but against each of the funny lines, you put the word cute. He said, no, you misread my handwriting. It was cut. It's true. But getting back to Tommy, the first time I saw Tommy Cooper was in Blackpool. And he was in a summer season at the South Pier Theatre. And he was doing a sketch, a very funny sketch, a send-up of Candid Camera. And it was fronted by Jeremy Hawke. And Jeremy Hawke says to the audience, ladies and gentlemen, before I bring on this next victim, I'm going to play a practical joke on him. I'm going to swallow these 2 cloves of garlic. And everything I say to him is going to begin with an H. And that was the basis of the sketch. Every time he said something, how are you? How are things today? Tommy would react and flinch. And it worked very, very funny. After the show, I went backstage to say hello to Tommy. I said, Tommy, that's a very funny sketch. Where'd you get it from? He said, oh, I wrote it myself. I said, oh, great. If you write funny stuff like that, you really don't need writers. Many years later, I was actually writing his TV series, and we had a 2-week gap in the middle. And I went to America on holiday in New York, and I was watching the television, and they were repeating the old Ed Sullivan shows from the early 1960s. And I saw one which Tommy was in. He was a guest on 6 of them, actually. He was popular over there. And this show, also a guest in that particular show, was Mickey Rooney. And what was Mickey Rooney doing? That Candid Camera sketch. And so I managed to get hold of a tape of the show. And when I got back, it was Tommy's birthday. I said, Tommy, I got a present for you. I gave him the tape. He said, what's on it? I said, when you get home tonight, you play it when you get home tonight. And that night he phoned me. He said, you bastard, where'd you get that from? I said, the same place as you did, you liar. That was for me. But Tommy was actually a bit of a cheat. And I'll explain what I mean by that. He always turned up late for gigs. And he always, while he's been in his dressing room, putting on his tuxedo, he'd wear a throat mic. And he'd send his son up on stage with a walking stick. And his son would go behind the curtain and keep banging the curtain. And Tommy's voice over the throat mic was saying, I'll find the opening to his curtain somewhere. There must be opening to his curtain somewhere. And the audience, thinking he was behind the curtain, were laughing their heads off. And then finally, when he got fully dressed, he'd go up and say, open the curtain and say, well, thank God you're still here, and go into his act. So he was getting laughs without even being there. But there was one comedian that went even further than that. Let's see if you can guess who this is. He did 39 one-hour-long shows for Thames Television over 10 years. Those shows were sold to 120 countries around the world. On American television, his show was on twice a night, on one station at 5:15, another station at 11:15. He alone, over those 10 years, kept Thames Television going with the money he earned. Now, who am I talking about?
That's O'Connor.
No, I'm talking, no, I'm talking about Benny Hill.
Yeah.
No, Des and I were together in the Air Force when I did my national service, and both of us went on holiday to Butlins in Filey, and we both entered, at 19 years old we both entered for the campus concert, and I got through the audition and he didn't, and I never let him forget that. But getting back to Benny Hill did that show for Thames Television for 10 years until he got so fat that it looked ridiculous in chasing the girls, because if they caught them, he couldn't have done anything anyway, right? But Benny, the reason I mentioned Benny is because in those 10 years, in those 39 one-hour-long shows, nothing ever died. Everything he did, every visual comedy bit, every verbal comedy bit, got a big laugh. It couldn't fail. You know why? Because every laugh came out of a can. Benny never had a studio audience. Reacted brilliantly to an audience who just wasn't there. He was terrified to face it. You couldn't do what I'm doing at this very moment, face a live audience. I assume you, yeah. He couldn't face a live audience at all. You never saw him on a Wogan show. You never saw him on a Parkinson show. He was just terrified of facing a live audience. But a great comedian. I mean, when he died, he left 10 million quid in his bank account. And when they cleared out his flat, they found another 2 million in teapots under cushions all over the show. He's a very, very good, successful comedian. At that time, when he left the BBC and went to Thames Television, at that time I was writing with a writing partner, Dick Vosburgh. Dick and I wrote together for about 6.5 years. And he phoned us up one day. He said, look, can I invite you to come to my place for supper tonight? I'll cook you a supper and talk about you writing for me. And so we turned up that night. And when he opened the door, he was wearing a pink frilly apron. And Dick Boswell said, Benny, you make someone a lovely wife. And he got very offended and spent the whole evening telling us how he picked up girls at Hammersmith Palais and telling us all about his sex life. Because we never knew his real sexuality. Not that it mattered in those days. Today it does matter. Because I counted yesterday, there are 13 BBC shows fronted by gay people. It's got to the point at the BBC now where if you want to get in, you've got to come out. That's true with the BBC. Around that time when Benny Hill was a big success, there was another comedian also I enjoyed working with. And that was, I'm going back to when commercial television first started in England, which was in August 1955. I'm sure none of you remember it because you were still in your cradles by then. But when commercial television first started, Dick Boswell and I were hired to write the very first comedy series. It was a series of 3 one-hour-long shows under the title of Here We Go, and it starred June Whitfield, Billy Dainty, and Bruce Forsyth. So I've known Bruce for over 60 years. I've known his jokes a lot longer. Bruce in those days was a great comedian. He could sing, he could dance, he could do impressions, he could play piano. There's nothing this guy couldn't do. Marvel's ad lib and everything. But the years took their toll, and he wound up, as you know, many years later on Strictly Come Dancing. Unfortunately, well past his sell-by date. At that age, he couldn't even remember the gags. He had to read them off cue cards, and he read them so slowly. Time he got to the end, you knew what the end was going to be anyway. But on that show, Strictly Come Dancing, the rule was that they had to lose one person every week. And for my money, Bruce is the one they should have lost. It's not his fault. Age had caught up with him. I mean, when he died, they said he was 89, but nobody was sure because they were still carbon dating his birth certificate. Yeah, because he'd been in the business a long time. I mean, he started off doing the Empire circuit, the Roman Empire, the Ottoman Empire. I actually went to one of his birthday parties, and there was that? What?
Sorry.
Okay. So I actually went to one of Bruce Forsyth's birthday parties, and there were 79 candles on the slice that I had. But when he died, he said he had an enemy in the world because he outlived a lot of them. But Bob Monkhouse wrote a marvelous book called Over the Limit. And in this book, he devoted a complete chapter to Bruce Forsyth. And in that chapter, he said, Bruce Forsyth was the greatest comedian in the world, if you believe what Bruce Forsyth says. They're great rivals. But when Bruce came out of Strictly Come Dancing, he went to live in Puerto Rico, where his wife comes from. And the BBC wanted him to come back to London to front one episode of Have I Got News for You? Don't know whether you remember it. It was very, very good, actually. They repeated it about 7 months ago. And they phoned him up in Puerto Rico and said, would you come back and do this one show for us? He said, yeah, sure, if you send a plane to pick me up. They said, no problem. And on the day, they sent a plane to pick him up. But it was bad weather, and the plane was delayed. And at the BBC, they're very worried. Will he arrive in time? Will he arrive in time? And then they were relieved to get a call from the airport to say the Ego has landed. That's Bruce. Comedian I've never actually worked with or really met, but I had great admiration for the John Cleese. I say never really met, though I did actually sit right next to him for a whole day at a writing seminar, but I never spoke to him because I didn't want to intrude in his privacy. And I was sorry about that because 3 weeks later, the Variety Club of Great Britain decided to give him an award as the best comedy performer of the year. And he refused to go to the studio to accept it. He said, I'll accept it sitting at my desk at home and make my acceptance speech then, which he did. And sitting right in front on his desk was, if I can find it, was my first book. I haven't got it. My first book, How to Write Comedy. and which sold 300 copies the following day. I thank him for. I assume he must have read the book because in that case I had probably some input into his comedy writing, which is very strange. It's strange because any professional comedy writer will tell you that if you're writing a situation comedy, your main character has got to be someone that is likable, someone that you have empathy and sympathy with. And who the character he played, he invented, was Basil Fawlty, an out-and-out swine, was nasty to everybody, was rude to everybody. But it worked for one simple reason. He was afraid of his wife. That gave him the vulnerability to make it work. But there were only ever 12 episodes of 40 Towers. And the reason for that is because he wrote them with his first wife, Connie Booth, who remember played the and the BBC, when it was a big success, the BBC wanted many more, but by that time they got a divorce and she wouldn't work with him at all anymore. Anyway, I went along to a lecture that John Cleese gave at the British Film Institute. And it was a year that he made the film A Fish Called Wanda. And he told us that not only did he write the film, but he starred in it. And after that film, that year, he made £52 million. And the same year, he sold a company he owned called Video Arts, which made TV commercials. He sold that for 30 million. So that at 1 year, he made £82 million. And today he's flat broke because of all the money he pays to his ex-wives. Because I told you that his first wife was Connie Booth, who was American. Surprisingly, his other 3 wives are also American. He married 4 American ladies. And each one he married in their own hometown in America. And they asked him one day, when you married your 3rd wife, what state were you in? He said, temporary insanity. When you told her you were divorcing her, how did she take it? He said, in cash. John today is a very, very angry man because the BBC have recently told him they're never going to repeat the Monty Python shows ever again. They say, because comedy's changed. It's all moved on since then. And it's true. I mean, people say to me, what do you think of the modern comedians? And my answer is, I try not to think of the modern comedians because there's only about 3 that I like. I like Frank Skinner. I like Jack Dee. I like Peter Kay. I used to like Lee Evans, which is very sad because Lee Evans has decided to retire. And what's even more sad is Russell Brand hasn't decided to retire. I can't stand him and his cohort, Jonathan Ross. I still think they shot the wrong JR. But getting on from John Cleese, we've got some women in our audience, so let's talk about the feminine side. I did about 48 shows, I think, with Hattie Jakes. Lovely lady, thoroughly enjoyed working with her. She's really, really nice. But on the other hand, I also did 13 shows with Hilda Baker. You remember Hilda Baker? Hilda Baker.
Yep.
Remember she had 3 catchphrases. You remember? One was "Be soon." One was "I might have to get a little hand, put that watch," and the third one was "She knows, you know." They were the 3 catchphrases. I remember I asked her one day, "Where'd you get them from?" She said, "Oh, my Aunt Millie used to say them. I thought they were funny, so I put them in the act." Anyway, Hilda Baker was only 4'11", but she drove a Mark 9 Jaguar and sat on 6 pillows so she could see over the steering wheel. And a very vague lady. She often kept us waiting 2 hours while she put her makeup on. She really thought she was a young Joan Collins. Anyway, this series I did with them starred her. It was 13.5-hour situation comedy shows, a series, and it starred Hilda Baker and Charles Hawtrey. Now, originally we were going to call it Charles and Hilda, so we found out they hated each other's guts. And so we changed the title to Best of Friends, and we had Kenneth Connor and Patricia Hayes standing by on contract to take over at a moment's notice. Luckily, we never called them in. For somehow we got through the series. It's the hardest thing I ever wrote because those characters supposed to be best of friends. They were never in a scene together. If one walked in the room, the other would walk out. But anyway, we got through the series of the 13.5-hour shows. Many years later, she went into another TV series, which I don't know whether you remember. It was called Nearest and Dearest. It starred Hilda Baker and Jimmy Jewell as brother and sister running a pickle factory, which they inherited. And when I up in Blackpool one day doing the Mike and Bernie winter shows, and I bumped into Jimmy Jewell, looking very unhappy. I said, Jimmy, what's the problem? He said, I've just finished doing a series with Hilda Baker. He said, there isn't enough money in the world to ever make me work with her again. There obviously was enough money because they did a second series. At that time, I got a call from Jess Yates. I don't know whether you remember Jess Yates. Jess Yates used to have a program called Stars on Sunday. We used to call him the Bishop. He was Paulie Yates' father, not her biological father, as we later found out was Huey Green, who'd been having an affair with her mother. But Jess Yates' name was on the birth certificate as her father married to Martha Torren, her mother. Okay. Anyway, Jess Yates by that time had become head of children's television for Yorkshire TV. And he phoned me one day. He said, Brad, he said, we're thinking of bringing back the Old Mother Riley series. He said, we've got Roy Rowland, who used to be Arthur Lucan's stand-in. He'll play the Old Mother Riley character, and we'd like you to write the pilot show. I said, well, thank you very much indeed, Jess. But I was about 8 or 9 when I saw the last Old Mother Riley's film. I don't remember very much about it. He said, well, come up to Leeds tomorrow and I'll hire two of the films for you to watch. And I did. And I could not believe what I was watching. Because every single thing that Hilda Baker did, every hand action, every mannerism, and those 3 catchphrases were all borrowed from Arthur Lucan. Because the public, bless them, do not have much of a memory for old comedy. I tell you what, let's break off for a minute. And as an experiment, let's see what your memory is like. I'll tell you 3 jokes and see if you can remember them in half an hour's time when I finish talking. Now, no pencils and paper, right? Let's see if you can rely on your own memory. All right, the first joke is about 4 ladies who've been meeting every Monday night for 20 years to play poker. And one of them says, look, I can't hold back any longer. I've got a confession to make. I'm a kleptomaniac. But don't worry, I wouldn't steal of any of you because we've been friends for 20 years. Second one said, all right, I'll make a confession as well. I'm an infomaniac, but don't worry, I wouldn't steal any of your husbands because we've been friends for all these years. Third one said, I'm a lesbian. She said, but if I found any of you, you'd have known by now. Then look at the fourth one. All right, if you're all going to make confessions, I'll make a confession as well. I'm a terrible gossip. I can't stand there talking. I've got some phone calls to make. Okay, second joke. Yeah, 4 men also been playing poker every Monday night for 10 years, but they've been playing poker for money, and they know their wives will object. So they tell their wives they're at the Turkish bath because, you know, one sex you can't check. And one night, after 10 years playing poker on Monday night, one of them loses £8,000 and he has a heart attack and dies on the spot. And someone has got to tell the wife. They draw straws, and poor little Cyril gets the short straw. He goes along, tells the wife, he knocks on the door. Hey, Jess, can I help you? His manager said, you don't know me, but me, your husband, and 2 other friends of ours been playing poker every Monday night for money. She said, what? I thought my husband was at Turkish bath. Exactly. All our wives thought that, because I know you'd object, but I have to tell you that we've been playing poker for money. Now, the reason I have to tell you is because tonight, your husband lost £8,000. She says, he lost £8,000? He should drop dead. He said, he did. Okay. Different kind of joke this time. This one takes place on an aeroplane, and the captain's voice comes over the tannoy. It says, ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard flight BA 513 from Heathrow to Los Angeles. Tonight we'll be flying at a height of 33,000 feet. And our flying time will be, huge scream, deathly silence for 20 seconds. Then the captain's voice comes over the tannoy again and says, ladies and gentlemen, I better explain what happened. He said, while I was making that announcement, the stewardess was pouring me a hot cup of coffee, and unfortunately it missed the saucer and landed in my lap. You should see the front of my trousers. And one of the passengers says, you should see the back of mine. See if you can remember. See if you can remember those jokes by the time I finish. The most important thing that a comedian can have is great timing. And I think the greatest of the lot for me would have been Jack Benny. And Jack Benny proved that when he came over to London in 1964 and did one show for the BBC, which was produced by Ernest Maxim, a friend of mine who told me the story. He said, Ernest phoned up Jack, who was staying at Claridge's at the time. He said, Jack, they've just delivered the first part of the script. When do I get the rest? And Jack said, no, that is the whole script. And I said, no. He said, Jack, he says, I've just timed it. It's 17 minutes. He said, the show's an hour. So when do I get the rest of the script? And Jack said, no. Ernest, that is the whole script. And I said, look, I've been in the business 20 years. I can time the script. The most this can run for is 20 minutes. And Jack said, Ernest, I promise you that is the whole script. Because every time the audience stopped laughing, I turn my head, I turn back again, they start laughing again. And he made that 17-minute script last a complete hour. Fantastic timing. But if you're working for someone like Jack Benny, it's a gift for a writer because he had four things going for him. Four personas that you can make fun out of. One was he never admitted to being older than 39. Two, that he played the violin badly. Actually, he was a virtuoso because you've got to be that good to play that bad, right? Third thing was he made jokes about having a toupee, which he never really had. And the fourth thing that he made jokes about was his stinginess. And I'm sure you all know the joke where he was walking along the street and a mugger comes up to him and says, money or your life? I said, money or your life? And Jack said, I'm still thinking about it. That was typical. And using just that gimmick, my favorite show, Jack Benny's, was where his manservant, Rochester, comes into the room and said, Mr. Benny, something different about the curtains. You changed the curtains. And Jack said, yeah, Rochester, I've had those same check curtains for 30 years. I got fed up with them, so I got new curtains. Rochester, it looks like, look, now you're here, Rochester, let's sit down and eat. And the tablecloth is made out of the old curtains. The napkins are made out of the old curtains. When he sneezes, the handkerchief is made out of the old curtains. All the way through the show, everything's made out of the old curtains. The very end of the show, when he goes to bed, he drops his trousers and his shorts are made out of the old curtains. 14 laughs they got out of that one simple little gimmick. There was one English comedian, no longer with us, who borrowed one of those four gimmicks. What gimmick was I talking about and who was the comedian? The false, the toupee, Ernie Wise, right? And that was, Ernie did a lot of gags about the false toupee. Ernie had three things going for him. One was the false toupee. The second one was that he was a lousy playwright. And the third one was that he was stingy. And I can certainly vouch for that third one. Way back in 1961, I got a call from Ernest saying, Brad, he said, Eric and I are going out on tour. We need some more material. Can you write something for us? I stayed up all that night and I wrote a sketch in which Ernie was teaching Eric ballroom dancing with Eric to play the girl. And I phoned up Ernie and said, Ernie, I've written the sketch. He said, well, let's meet for lunch at the Regent Palace Hotel. You can read the sketch to me. And so we met for lunch at Regent Palace Hotel, which I wound up paying for, obviously, being Ernie. And I read the sketch to him. He said, it's fine. And on the spot, he wrote me out a check for £25, which in 1961 was a lot of money. And I completely forgot about it. So 6 months later, he phoned me up. He said, Brad, we haven't used the sketch yet. Can I have the money back? Anyway, many years later, I was watching one of their TV shows. It was about a year before they finally packed up the act because poor old Eric had the heart attack and died. I was watching a show, and remember in those TV shows, they used to start at the back of the stage and dance their way down to the front of the stage with funny dance, arms and legs flailing. I later saw was from a 1926 Laurel and Hardy film. And anyway, they danced down to the front of the camera. And a man comes out of the audience. He says, excuse me, can I have my picture taken with you? I said, but we've already started the show. Can't you come back later? He said, no, he said, because I live in Liverpool and I missed my last train. I said, well, all right, as long as it's quick. So they posed with him. He said, I'll tell you what, wouldn't it be nice if my wife was in the picture because she's in the audience and my next door neighbor and my second cousin and my brother-in-law and 10 of them lined up. and the milk and whites aren't eaten in the picture. They're just in the picture. Thank you very much indeed. When I get back to Liverpool, I'll tell everybody how nice you two Ronnies were. I look at the credits of the show and it says script by Green and Hills, additional material by Ernie Wise. So I phoned up Ernie, who was living in Runnymede at the time. I said, Ernie, where did you get that opening routine with the guy wanting his picture taken? He said, why? I said, because I wrote that routine. He said, well, I bought it off a guy called Rene van Voren in Holland. Well, in addition to writing for England, I wrote for 7 other countries. And I had done that sketch I had written for Dutch television. And Rene said, well, I phoned Rene. I said, did you give or sell Ernie that sketch? He said, well, he came here looking for material. I showed him a lot of our old stuff. He said, that one will do for us. I said, well, it belongs to Brad Ashton. He said, oh, well, I won't buy it. I'll give you 2 old Green Hill sketches in return, which he never did. So I phoned him up again. I said, Ernie, you didn't buy that routine. He said, oh, you're not still on about it, are you? I said, yeah, because the BBC at that time were paying £100 a minute. I said, the routine ran for 3.5 minutes. 350 quid went into someone's pocket. Your name was on the show, not mine. He said, I'll look into it. 9 months go by before I hear another word, and then they repeat the show. So I phone him up again and say, Ernie, it is now £700. And from now on, it accrues interest. And he paid me 50 quid at a time every couple of months, hoping I'd forget the rest. But that was Ernie. And he was playing himself. I certainly wouldn't knock him as a performer. I think Morecambe and Wise were a marvelous double act. At the time of their height, I was writing the rival show, Mike and Bernie Winter Show, for 6.5 years. I also wrote 2 series of Little and Large. And there was a subtle difference between them and Morecambe and Wise. Let's take also, let's include Julian Morris. Because you think of Julian Morris, think of Mike and Bernie Winter, think of Little and Large. When they were performing, they faced the audience. Morecambe and Wise faced each other, as though the audience were interloping on what they were saying. Very subtle difference, but it worked beautifully well. But the best double act at that time, I would have said, would be the 2 Ronnies. Now, 2 Ronnies were different kinds of double act. They weren't a comedian and straight man. They were a comedian and comedy actor. Now, what's the difference between a comedian and comedy actor? The best way to explain that is to say that Ronnie Corbett was a comedian. In other words, he could get laughs as himself, whereas Ronnie Barker, like Peter Sellers and Dick Emery, had to go into character to be funny. They weren't funny as themselves at all. But Ronnie Barker was a great comedy actor. I mean, and Open All Hours, he played a character with a stutter, which if anybody else had played would have been bad taste. He played beautifully. Anybody in my audience remember the radio series that Ronnie Barker starred in before he went into television? The series was The Navy Larks.
Oh, yeah.
In The Navy Larks, Ronnie Barker played Able Seaman Goldstein. Also in the show was an actor called Michael Bates, who played Able Seaman Bates, the only man they couldn't promote to master. Ronnie Barker went on to do Open All Hours, which was a great series, which I think it was the BBC were wrong in repeating. 2 years ago, they brought it back again with David Jason playing the Ronnie Barker part, which he played brilliantly. But the guy playing his part wasn't very good, and it wasn't a big success. And the BBC are never going to bring it back again. And I'm personally against bringing back old series with new casts. I don't think it worked with Dad's Army. I certainly don't think it worked when Paul Merton did 6 of the old Hancock shows, playing the Hancock part. I think if a show was a big success, let it rest on its fame. Guys, we mentioned that the Open All Hours was written together with David Jason playing the other part in it. Now, David Jason, I think, was a better actor even than Ronnie Barker, because David Jason went from comedy to drama, playing Detective Inspector Frost, right? And to be a policeman, you've got to be a minimum of 5'8". David Jason is 5'6", so he was acting 2 inches above his height. But the BBC were no fools. They surrounded him with short actors to make it. Because height can be important. I found that out really about 40 years ago, really. when I would be about 49, because I'm 89 now, which is true. I mean, I am actually 89. I'm not kidding. When people look at me, and I tell them I'm 89, they don't believe it. They think I'm much older, especially when they hear my jokes. No, even I find it hard to believe I'm 89, because Petula Clark was born the same year as I was, and she's only 79. Don't know how she does it. Going back those 40 years. I was taking driving lessons at the BSM school in Stamford Hill in North London. And they provided a Ford Popular car for me to take my lesson in. And every time I got there, every Thursday evening when I got there, the front seat of that car was pushed so far back, it was practically in the car behind. And I got there early one day and found out why. Because getting out of that front seat, in other words, the guy who'd been taking the lesson before me each week was 6'7" Bernie Breslau. And Bernie and I became great friends. And one day I saw his CV, which had him down at 6'5". I said, but Bernie, you're 6'7". He said, yeah. I said, but your CV says you're 6'5". Said, yeah. I said, but why? He said, because the taller you are, the higher they've got to build the scenery. And those extra 2 inches can cost £5,000. So I put myself down at 6'5" and I stoop a lot. I thought it was a great idea. But in those days, I was playing tiny parts in shows myself. I used to write myself in for one line, never more than one line. It actually got me into a lot of trouble at one time. In 1962, I was in an Alfred Markstein show, and the guest in the show was Dennis Price, the actor. And I was in a sketch with him. I was playing his butler with just one line. And at rehearsal, he said, Brad, he said, of course, you're a member of Equity. That's all, Equity Schmexity for one lousy line. He called a strike, and all 5 studios in Wembley went on strike because Brad Ashton wasn't a member of Equity for his one line. I still carried on, but after that, I wore a beard or moustache or blacked up or a wig or anything I could that wouldn't be recognized. And I was in this one show with Bernie Breslau. And Bernie Breslau was playing the Big White Hunter, and I was playing his African Sherpa, all blacked up. And he clapped his hands. I came in and said, "You called Sahib?" He says, "Yes, Abdul. It's all right, you can stand up now." And I looked up and said, "I am standing up." I got home that night. My mother said, "That wasn't nice, was it?" I said, "What?" She said, "Just because he's tall and you're not, in front of 6 million people to say that." I said, "But I wrote that line. If we didn't have to say it, it's difficult." That's an interesting point, though, because I said that show had 6 million viewers, and it was an afternoon show. It's all changed now. When we did the Mike and Bernie Winter shows, we had 21 million viewers. Milk and White had 28 million viewers. Today, if they get 4 million, they do a lap of honor. It's all completely changed. Let's talk about now a legend in show business, a guy I never actually worked with, but I had great admiration for his fame. I'm talking about Max Miller. Now, Max Miller, I never actually spoke to, but I went along to his show. He was in a midday musical show, a BBC recording of it, and it was fronted by Jack Tamanio. And Jack Tamanio said, ladies and gentlemen, now we get to the star of our show, a man that needs no introduction, but it's more than my job's worth not to give him one, Max Miller. And the orchestra played, "I fell in love with Mary from the dairy." He sings the tune right the way through. No sign of Max Miller. And Jack the manager said, "Ladies and gentlemen, obviously we've got technical hitch. Please keep your seats." 10 minutes later, right, man needs no introduction, more than my job's worth, not to give him one, Max Miller. And again, the orchestra played right the way through, still no Max Miller. 20 minutes later, he introduced him, and this time Max Miller did come on and did his act, which was very funny. And after the show, I said to the producer, I said, what happened? He said, well, Max was next door in the pub and refused to come on till he's finished his drink. I said, couldn't you do anything about it? He said, no, he said, hard enough to get at top of the bill these days. And Max, the reason Max stays so long is because people buying him free drinks. You know? But anyway, later on that same year, Max Miller was in the Royal Command Performance. And I don't know whether you realize the Royal Command Performance alternates. 1 year BBC, then ITV, then BBC, then ITV. This year it was ITV's turn, and it was being produced by Val Parnell. Now, if you're a comedian in the Royal Command Performance, you're allowed 6 minutes, not a second more. And after 8 minutes, there was Max still on stage performing. And Val Parnell was in the room and said, "Come off, come off." ignored him entirely in 12 minutes. And when he got off, Barbara grabbed him by the throat and the neck. He said, "You'll never work for ITV ever again." And Max brushed him aside and said, "Val, you're just 12 million quid too late." He couldn't make it less. He owned half of Brighton. If you go down to Brighton, there are 10 houses, 3 flats on that he owned and lived in. And he thought to himself, all right, so I've lost ITV. I don't get much work from ITV anyway, but I've still got the BBC. But that very same year, he got banned by the BBC as well. Now, anybody in my audience know the 2 jokes that got him banned by the BBC? See some, or anybody knows him, anybody got the guts to tell him? I'll tell you, all right, I'll tell you one. I didn't tell you both, otherwise I'll get banned. Excuse me, let me just have a sip. That's better. This joke he told, he said, I was sitting on a train on the Piccadilly line, tube train on the Piccadilly line, because my house is actually on the Piccadilly line. So I was sitting on a train on the Piccadilly line, and there was a lady strap hanging above me. And when we got to the end of the line, the train lurched to a halt, and she landed in my lap. And she said, "Excuse me, sir, is this Cockfoster's?" He said, "No, madam, it's mine." I did tell you the other joke. As I say, will get me banned. It's not banned because the BBC were very straight-laced in those days. They even banned George Formby because of 3 of his songs. One of his songs was "When I'm Cleaning Windows," had the line in, "If you could see what I can see when I'm cleaning windows," they said, "projected dirty thoughts." Another song was "I'm standing at a lamppost at the corner of the street." They said, "Well, prostitutes stand at lampposts at the corner of the street, projects dirty thoughts." I won't even tell you what they thought of his other song, "My Little Stick of Blackpool Rock." Let's carry on. Tell you about Warren Mizell. You know who Warren Mizell was? You're looking puzzled. Well, you'd know if I told you he changed his name to Mitchell, Warren Mitchell, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And I think it's very difficult to picture, but it's true. Warren Mitchell, for the first 5 years of his career, was a song and dance man. He actually went to a stage school in Walthamstow in East London, where he learned ballet and tap dancing and singing, dance, and everything. And for 5 years, he was a song and dance man till he started to lose his hair and got a bit of a paunch and dropped it and became a straight actor. Now, Warren Mitchell, as you know, played Elf Garnet in the series Till Death Us Do Part. It was not written for Warren Mitchell. Anybody in our audience today know who the part was written for? The BBC commissioned Johnny Speight to write a situation comedy series for Peter Sellers. So the Elf Garnet was written for Peter Sellers, and somehow or other, excuse me, Leo McKern got hold of a copy of the script, and he said, "This is me. Every line in it is me." He said, "Why didn't they offer this to me? I could do this blindfolded." He phoned the BBC. He said, "Can I have the part of Elf Garnet?" He said, "Sorry, we've already signed up Peter Sellers for it." And a week before they were due to do the pilot show, Peter Sellers was offered a part in a film called The Lady Killers. It's only a small part, but the dates clashed. He couldn't do both. So he had to make up his mind which he wanted to do. He figured if I played the part, even though it's a small part in The Lady Killers, it might lead to bigger films, which we now know it did. If I do the pilot, well, in those days, and I think it still prevails today, for every 8 pilots the BBC do, only 1 becomes a series. So it might have been a waste of time anyway, he figured. So he phoned the BBC. He said, "Would you release me from a contract?" And they said, we're thinking, well, we've got Leo McKern standing by. He said, "Yeah, sure." And they released him. They went to Leo McKern and said, "Leo, the part is yours." He said, "What a pity you didn't tell me yesterday. I've just signed to do Rumpola Bailey." So they had no one to play the part, and they tried all. We were either too tall, too short, too fat, too thin, wrong accent. And someone remembered seeing Warren Mitchell playing a Cockney gangster in a West End play, and he got the part, which is just as well for Johnny Speight. Because Johnny Speight wrote that series for 8 years. He made 4 million quid out of the English version, and he made another 4 million quid out of the American version called All in the Family. So he made 8 million quid out of that show. thanks to Warren Mitchell. I say thanks to Warren Mitchell because Johnny Speight didn't remember writing more than about a third of those shows. All he remembered was he used to work from his attic at home in North London. He had an office up there, and he used to remember taking a bottle of whiskey up to his office, coming down the following morning with the bottle empty and the script written, and sometimes no more than 25 minutes. And Warren Mitchell was able to ad-lib the other 5 minutes in character. So it made a big success. Then again, let's test your memory for a minute. How am I doing time? When Warren Mitchell, sorry, when Warren Mitchell came out of Till Death Us Do Part, he went into another series which ran for 6 shows on television, written by the guys who wrote Birds of a Feather. This series was called So You Think You've Got Problems, in which Warren Mitchell played a Jew in Belfast, running a factory in which half the workers were Catholic and half were Protestant, and he had to keep the peace between them. Anybody remember that? No. When Harry Corbett came out of Steptoe and Son, he went into a series, also ran for 6 shows on television, written by Galton Simpson. It was called Mr. H, in which he played a site manager on a building site. Ran for 6 shows. Anybody remember that?
Nope.
When Reg Varney came out of On the Buses, he went into a series called Down the Gate, in which he played the Billingsgate fish porter for 6 shows. Anybody remember that? No. You can be so typecast in one character, people don't even remember you doing anything else. Because casting can be important. You remember a friend of mine, Austin Stewart, wrote a pilot of a show called Oh Brother, about a Catholic priest. You remember that? If you remember the series, you remember who played the part of the Catholic priest?
Derek Nimmo.
Derek Nimmo, exactly. 6 months later, Edwin Lapps and his wife wrote the pilot of a show called All Gas and Gators, which is about a vicar. Anybody remember who played the lead in that?
Well, Derek Nimmo was in
Derek
it.
Nimmo, exactly.
Yeah.
Every 6 months he changed religion. It was ridiculous. The casting can be very important. I was watching yesterday, interviewed Esther Ransom on a show, and it reminded me when she had her big TV series on Saturday nights. And after the second series, she wanted to go up market. And there was a BBC radio announcer called Ronald Fletcher, who was very, very upmarket. He used to be in the Braden shows and was very upmarket. And she figured he would be good for the show. He had this marvelous Mayfair accent. And so she got in touch with the casting department of the BBC. She said, would you please book him for me? But only book him for one show. We'll try him out for one show. If it works well, we'll have him for the series. But only book him for one show to start with. They came out the following day and said, well, we've spoken to Mr. Fletcher, and he says he won't sign for one show. It's either the whole series or nothing. She said, all right, well, he is good. Sign him for the whole series. And they did. And who turns up for the show? Cyril Fletcher. They got the wrong Fletcher. And Cyril Fletcher, not only that, but by that time, his eyes had gone. He's all cockeyed, and he couldn't have him face camera. He had it all shot in profile. That reminds me, to digress for a minute, I ran for 8 years a comedy writing football team called the Comedy Writers 11. And my star player was Marty Feldman. And when we started at the beginning, Marty Feldman was a very good looking boy. And then the bitch of grand trouble happened, and his eyes went all cockeyed, and I had to drop him from the team because he was kicking the ball in our own goal. I'm more or less coming towards the end. So let's talk about 2 particular people I want to quickly get in, because I haven't got time to get them all in. One would be Arthur Askey. In 1953, Arthur Askey was the biggest comedian in the country. He's only 5'1", but he was the biggest comedian in the country because he had a TV series called Before Your Very Eyes. And he wanted to go, it was a huge series, big success. And he wanted to do a radio series. And I got a call from the head of entertainment, BBC Radio, Con Mahoney, who said, Brad, Arthur wants to do a radio series. We'd like you to write the pilot. Now, in 1953, I was only just joined the profession. This to me was a huge accolade. So I sat down and I worked on that script for 10 days solidly, honing it every day to make it better. So finally I was happy with it, handed it into the BBC, never heard a word for a whole month. And I phoned up and said, what happened to the script? And commentator said, what's that? I sent it on to Arthur. 10 minutes later, he phoned me up. He said, that Arthur said, would you have lunch with him tomorrow? And there I am having lunch with Arthur Askey. And we're talking about the weather. We're talking about politics. We're talking about the traffic. No mention of the script. And I'm now on tenterhooks. I can't stand it. I said, Arthur, have you read the script? He said, yes, dear boy. I said, well, what did you think of it? He said, it's all right as far as it goes. I said, what do you mean as far as it goes? He said, well, you haven't put my ad libs in yet. And until then, I really believe that comedians ad lib. It's our job as writers to make it look like they're ad libbing. I mean, one show which sort of last time it's ad libs for years would have been Morecambe and Wise. But every so-called ad lib when things went wrong were written in the script. They had to be, because the camera had to be, there are 4 cameras, they had to have a camera on the person talking, the person reacting. So that all was rehearsed in the script. I mean, the show you watch on Friday night, Have I Got News for You? You look at the credits, they're called researchers of the credits. They're actually 6 comedy writers. So there's very little ad-lib that goes on, really. It has to be well rehearsed. I mean, there are even many quiz shows in which the contestants are told the questions in advance, not the answers, but so they're not surprised. They waste time thinking about it. A lot that goes on behind the scenes that you don't really know about. And then the other person I want to mention, because you can't talk about British comedy without talking about Tony Hancock. Tony Hancock got for me the easiest laugh I've ever seen on British television because of his character as a cynic. And I don't know whether you remember this show. He was on a cruise, and he's walking along the deck of the ship. And further along the deck was a captain talking to the head chef. And the captain says to the head chef, I'm fed up with these same vegetables every day. Haven't you got anything different? And Hancock walks by just in time to hear the head chef say, I'm sure we got some leaks downstairs. It writes itself. They're not telling us we're sinking, man the lifeboats, and cause a home mutiny because of his character. Hancock himself, of course, made the biggest mistake of his career when he got rid of Sid James, Hattie Jakes, Bill Kerr, and Kenneth Williams, because comedy comes out of contrast. They were there as contrast to his character. And the worst thing that happened, of course, was that he had a very bad car accident in which he banged his head very badly. And after that, he refused to learn scripts. And he used to then insist on idiot cards. And so he'd read the part off of cue cards held up. And if you watch, there's one show particularly of their series called The Bowmans, which was sent up the Archers. And if they replay it again, you watch his eyeballs moving as he's reading off the cue cards. Then he went down and down and down until he drank too much and finally wound up in Australia doing 7 shows, which were so bad they cannibalized it and put them into one show, which I've got a copy of upstairs. And it's not the old Hancock we knew and loved. But I don't want to finish on a sad note like that. So let me tell you, I gave you 3 jokes. Let me give you one more joke, okay? This one is a religious joke. And it's about a girl who'd been on a cruise. And she came home and she said to her parents, Mum, Dad, wonderful news. I met this marvelous boy on the cruise. We're madly in love and we want to get married. They said, well, great, marvelous. What's his name? She said, Izzy Levy. I said, you mean he's Jewish? I said, yeah, well, in that case, you can't marry him. Said, why? Well, you can't marry a Jew or Hindu or Muslim. You're a Catholic girl. You can only marry a Catholic boy. People were madly in love. They don't care. We'll only agree to you marrying a Catholic boy. Yeah, but what can we do? Well, see if you can talk him into becoming a Catholic. I said, well, I'll try. 2 weeks later, she came and said, great, Mum, Dad, great news. I worked hard on him and he's agreed to become a Catholic. Said, well, in that case, we'll plan the wedding. They do. And a week before the wedding, she comes in crying her eyes out. Mum, Dad, the wedding's off. I said, why? Religious grounds. What do you mean religious grounds? You said you worked hard on him to become a Catholic. She said, I worked too hard. Now he wants to be a priest. All right. I'll have a few minutes for questions. I say I can't get round to Dick Emery, Norman Wisdom, Michael McIntyre, Groucho, Jimmy Brown, Dave. So many. Perhaps I'll come back some other time and talk about them and how comedy is created. But for the next few minutes, if you want to ask me any questions, then I've got to take my wife to the hospital after that for an appointment. So we've got about 5 minutes if you would, any questions you want to ask.
Yes, Brad, my name's Bill. I can't say in your day when you were writing, you didn't use bad language, yet the comedians of the day, particularly on stage, to get laughter have to F and C all the time. Why is that? Do you know that bad language in comedy?
It's following fashion. Let me explain that when Lee Evans, Lee Evans, I work with his father a lot, who actually won't even talk to him because he swears a lot. And they asked Lee Evans, why do you, because his programs were so bad swearing, they had to put them on 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
When the kids are, hopefully in bed. But they said, why do you swear such a lot? He said, I can't help it. He said, the audience don't like it, fuck them. Exactly what he said. I mean, Billy Connolly, I can't stand, a great comedian, but he will swear unnecessarily so.
Non-stop.
Yeah, it says, Eric Sykes said, if your stuff is funny enough, you don't even have to use the word bloody. It is, if your idea is, if you've got enough confidence in what you're doing, you don't need to swear. But the point you make is what ruined the career of the one comedian I haven't mentioned, Dave Allen. Dave Allen left the BBC and went to Thames Television, and they wrote 6 shows for him, and none of them were ever done because he fell out with a producer, and he said, "I'm not working with that producer." And Thames Television said, "Well, we decide who produces our shows. You work with him or not." And Dave Allen said, "I won't," and walked out on it. It might up until he died. He was still being sued by Thames Television, but he went back to the BBC. And they did one of those shows from the script that had been written. And in it, he did use the F word 5 times. And the head of entertainment was James Moyer, who was also chair of the Catholic Stage Guild, a religious guy. And he said, look, no way are you going to be allowed to swear. He said, well, Thames didn't mind. I said, well, what Thames did is their business. This is the BBC. You don't swear. I'm going back a year or two, right? But Dave dug his heels in. And he said, look, unless you let me use the F word at least 3 times per show, I won't do the series. And James Moyer said, all right, you can use the F word 3 times per show, knowing full well it was pre-recorded and the sisters had to cut it out afterwards, which they did. But I was there when James Moore said, I'll let him do it, but he'll never work for the BBC ever again while I'm here. He didn't. And I met him 4 years later in the Greenwich Theatre in the Loo, not by appointment, but I met him. He had long hair down to his shoulders like a tramp. I said, hello, Dave, what are you doing these days? He said, well, I've just done an hour-long show. This is November, this was. Just done an hour-long show for Central Television, and it goes out in January. If it's a success, I'm sure it will be, we'll do another 6 next year. They never even put that show out. It's still in the archives. He swore so much that they daren't put it out. And cleverly, he put the swear words in places where they couldn't be cut, in the middle of gags or middle of sketches. And so he ruined his career because he wanted to follow that whole thing of swearing like everybody else. Anyway, any other quick questions you want to ask?
Well, I remember the Max Miller thing.
Yeah.
I met a young lady going between 2 buildings across a plank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to finish it off and tell the rest?
I can't say anything since there's a lady in the audience.
Well, perhaps she can tell us that.
But that's the one, isn't it?
That's the other one, yeah.
And so I actually saw that on TV when I was a young lad, of course. Have you got any stories on Bill Maynard at all?
And who?
Bill Maynard.
Bill Maynard. Bill Maynard, yeah. When Bill Maynard started, his gimmick was that he was really skinny, very, very skinny. I was doing an American series called The Ugliest Girl in Town, which was not shown in England. It was done, I was script edited for American television. And Bill phoned me up one day. He said, look, I'm desperate for work. He said, I'm coming for an audition for the part of Harry in the episode you're filming tomorrow. Would you back me up and make sure I get the part? I said, but Bill, I said, this guy's a sumo wrestler type. I said, you're too skinny. He said, have you seen me lately? And he turned up and he got the part because by that he got so fat. trouble with Bill Maynard, who I as a person I like very much indeed, but he went for what we call insurance. The scripts were written by Bill Craig. He's the gaffer. He did, remember, and he'd take the script home at night and put in what he called insurance, which was gags from his stage act, which are old gags. And for my money, he didn't have a confidence in the script. He put old gags in, and that ruined the press. All said, "Oh, look at the old jokes he's using in his script." But say a nice guy, Bill. When I first started writing, he was together. If you remember, and I'm going to take him way back to the 1950s. He did a series called Great Scott, It's Maynard, Bill with Terry Scott and him. His first big TV series, and he went on from there to being a stand-up comic, and then to, as I say, the Gaffer series.
Yeah.
Who died unfortunately about 3 or 4 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else you want to talk about? No.
Well, thank you, Brad. Thank you for brightening up our morning. Very, very enjoyable. Thank you.
You realise why I needed to have 4 people unleashed. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask Dick to thank Brad in our usual way, please?
Yes, Brad. A very different talk and presentation to what we normally have, and I'm sure it's stirred up 1 or 2 memories of some of the great comedians of the past, and the background to what gives them their success, which is the script writers behind them. And it's been a very enjoyable hour we've had with you, and thank you very much. And I'll just ask our members to give their appreciation in the normal way.
Thank you.
Very good. Very good.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. But before I go, just to say that this book I mentioned before, it's £15. I'm not suggesting you spend £15, but if you go to your library and if 2 people ask for it, they'll stock a copy, and every time you read it, I get 8p, so you can make me rich. Okay, thanks again. Now, they told me a kid of 5 can work this computer, so I must. Yeah, anybody know where this kid of 5 is? Because I can't find my way out. Somewhere I should say leave. Yeah, I got it. Yeah, okay. Right. See you again, folks. Thanks for coming.
Very good.
All right,
Thank you.
Well,
Oh, that was excellent, wasn't it?
Very good indeed.
brilliant.
You can tell the joke now, Tony.
Not with Margaret watching.
Yeah.
We hear some of the jokes she tells. Especially when she's having you. Tell it next time.
Where Stuart disappeared to. Oh, there you are.
Where are you? Oh, there you are.
All right.
That was excellent. So a nice variation, Dick, from our usual talks. Quite interesting, I would say.
It's one that one of these that get circulated, and I just picked it up from the email. I think Eric passed it on to me.
Well, it's
Very good.
It's better than someone trying to sell us insurance or something. So
Just trying to sell his book.
yeah. Right. So if we move on, parish notices, etc. I'll just talk about the President's Lunch on a couple of weeks' time. As you know, Boris has done his thing. We all expected it, I think. We were going to have 9 tables of 8s and 10s, but now we have to have 6 tables of 6. So we had 71 people coming, which is a very good turnout, which meant there's going to be 12 tables, but there might be a few dropouts. I mean, I guess Tony now will not be coming. And I don't know at last minute if other people might drop out, but at the moment we have 12 tables of 6, and that means they will spill out slightly into the bar because of obviously more tables and less room. But Nevertheless, it will be a good occasion and should be enjoyable. So the next thing I'd just like to mention is I regret to hear that Ken Green has fractured his vertebrae and is at present undergoing therapy. Now, coupled with that, his partner Rhoda, who you all know, she's been in hospital since January. And she's just been released from hospital, having been in hospital all that time. So she's now housebound. So with this bad news, Ken has informed us his decision not to attend any functions in the foreseeable future. So we wish Ken and Rhoda well, of course. We're sending him flowers, which Tony might mention later. Our thoughts are with Ken, of course. And lastly, before we crack on, I'd just like to thank Barry for several months, years of leading the walking group. He's done such a great job. We've all enjoyed the walks, many interesting walks, many interesting pubs and lunches over that time. So brilliant, and thank you, Barry. And Chris Coakley, thanks, Chris, for taking over. You don't know what you're in for, but Chris is taking over from Barry. Last point, our next coffee meeting is on the 15th of July. We were going to go live, but with Boris now and what he's doing, I think it should be Zoom, not live. But what's your opinion? Because we need to let members know what's going on. So what's your opinions? Should we go live? Peter has contacted Queen's Head. They're confident that they can do tables of 6. My thoughts are that if you're watching something, I mean, don't forget we have an hour's talk generally. We're sitting in, and we usually sit in rows looking forward. If we're sitting on a table, someone's going to be, well, a lot of people are going to be squirreling around on their seats. I don't think you can move seats with this new regime. So what's your thoughts? Because we do have to make a decision.
Zoom, I think, will be better.
I think Zoom. I think Zoom's better. The whole purpose of the coffee, apart from the speaker, of course, is the standing around talking at the start while you're having coffee. Well, if you can't have that, you might just as well have the Zoom.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree.
So,
Can't see what can we? We'd be in quite a straight. We'd have rules applying to, can't mingle between tables. I think it'd be quite difficult. Apart from what you say about the view, somebody have a crick in the neck trying to see the screen. So I'd go for Zoom.
yeah.
So I think while any controls are on, we've got to do the Zoom.
Yeah.
And we know that the room at the Queen's Head does tend to get claustrophobic. So
without going on too far about the same thing, I think we'll send a little message out saying Zoom, shall we?
Yeah.
Yep.
Will you do that?
Sorry, Stuart.
Would you do that, please, Eric?
Yeah, we did. I did say in the round robin that it would be Zoom, which I think prompted Peter to raise the point that the Queen said.
Okay. That's fine. Thank you.
I'll confirm it in the next round robin.
Yeah. Excellent. So there's no confusion. Yeah. Thanks, Eric. So if we get onto the parish notices, then Eric, have you anything?
No, there's nothing really for me.
Okay. All in the round robin. Thanks for that. Ian, Treasurer, he's gone. Thank you, Ian.
Double booked.
Walks. Now, do I talk to Chris or do I talk to Eric?
Or you should
Well,
go to me.
I'm missing from the next walk, so Eric's doing the next one.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's yours.
So we've got
Don't know where we.
Chris is taking over, but both Barry and Chris are not around for July. So I've said I'll do the July walk, and it's going to be a walk in Peterborough, and it's going to be a tour of a number of the blue plaques in Peterborough. So it'll be a city centre walk, about the usual length. And well, we'll put the details in the round robin for next month.
That's excellent. Okay, that's good. Peter,
Sorry about that.
No nettles on this walk, so you can wear your.
Thank you, Eric.
So Tony as welfare officer.
Well, we've mentioned Tony Benz and Ken Green, and so as we've discussed, we'll send them a token of our thoughts of them. And I just wondered if anybody had heard how J is getting on.
No.
Or any other. What about anybody heard anything about Denley Evans at all?
Well, I don't think Denley's a member now, is he?
No. Well, Stuart and I were talking about it, but I just wondered if anybody had heard anything. That was all. No. Okay.
Tony, I was missing when you mentioned about Tony Benz. What is wrong with him?
He's had a heart attack.
Oh.
And he's in Addenbrooke's.
He's having a procedure today, Terry, at midday. So obviously after that, Gillian will give us an update, and we'll try and let the members know what that
Right.
is.
Thank you for that.
Tony, yeah.
No, I don't think there's anything else, unless anybody's heard of any incidents at all.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Dick.
Yeah. I've it's been a little bit of a soft touch as far as the arranging speakers, because of not really knowing where we're going from here. But hopefully for our August meeting, we should be back at the Queen's Head at Nassington. Certainly my interpretation of the way things are going is that the 19th of July is well, it's certainly a lot more positive than I think the 21st of June ever was.
Yeah.
I think the 21st of June being seen as Freedom Day, as they're interpreting it, was probably pushed out by the media, but it never was ever said anything other than 21st of June at the earliest.
Yeah.
So, but the 19th of July, I think the way things are going, I think they'll have to be a more fluid approach taken to the social distancing and such like. So I think we will be back in the Queen's Head by August. And I have got someone in mind who is local to Nassington to come and give us a talk, or rather to entertain us. He calls himself he's a retired school teacher, and he does poetry. So I'll keep you up to date on that. And from moving forward, I'll then start planning for September, and then October is out. November would be the next coffee morning that we would need somebody. So it's beginning to move forward now.
Thank you, Dick.
Thank you, Dick.
You've reminded me actually that I ought to talk to the prostate cancer people to see if they are coming on as we normally do in sort of September. I think the September coffee morning to give a talk. If you just bear that in mind, Dick.
Yeah. Well, I'll leave that then for you to.
Well, I'll see if anybody will come along and all the rest of it, and we'll liaise about that anyway.
Yeah, it's whether they want to give a talk or just come and receive the check.
Yes, exactly. Okay, guys. Well, thank you very much.
Stuart,
Can I come back in, Stuart?
Yes, of course.
I can see Jeff's there, and Jeff's had his ups and downs. I just wonder how you're doing, Jeff.
Fantastic.
Great.
Thank you.
And the other thing is, I see that Derek might be with us, but we can't see him. Are you there, Derek? So Derek Marston, you see?
Yeah, I see
Derek was at the last Zoom meeting, and I just wondered if he was there, but not visible. No, obviously is not, or else he would have responded.
Okay.
Could I just ask a supplementary to Tony about Ken Green? I saw Ken Green at the golf club only a few days ago. When did he have his back thing, as it were?
I'm not aware. Eric received an email. Eric, would you like to expand?
Yeah, he sent an email yesterday.
Yes.
Which I passed on to Stuart and Tony. And it was just in response to the round robin. And he basically said that he'd got some problems with his vertebrae and he was having treatment. Rona had just come out of hospital. And I think the combination of looking after her and not being fully mobile was meant that he wasn't going to attend meetings for a while. So
presumably,
maybe he did it on golf course.
Presumably, it's a long-standing problem with his back. As I say, he was up at the golf club. I wasn't playing golf, but he was at the 19th having a drink, and he looked as though he'd aged quite a lot, and he didn't look a very well man. But he was quite good spirits, and I just so it's an ongoing thing, presumably.
Yeah, I couldn't be sure, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, presumably from Okay, sorry.
That's the only news we've had.
Okay,
guys.
Excuse me, Mr. President.
Any other questions, Bill?
Yes. At the President's lunch, if we'd have been in our normal circumstances, I would have asked you for me to stand up and make a statement. That statement is, I wish to thank you and Eric and the committee for keeping Probus 02 going.
Here.
That's 15 months of information for Zoom meetings, for Eric for our round robin. All the people that I know in other Probus, they have done actually 5/8 of using the word F all. But here we are, we've kept going. We have Zoom meetings. I know there's only a dozen today, but I've seen 20, 22, 26 people on my screen, and it's been absolutely marvelous. And I'd like to have it recorded now that the founder president of O2, Bill Husthwaite, wishes to thank on behalf of all our members, the committee, particularly Stuart and Eric, for keeping us going. Thank you.
Here.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks for that. Bill, did I understand you right that you wanted to actually say this at the lunch?
Well, it wouldn't be, I don't think it would be appropriate now that they've spread out so far. If we'd have been in the marquee as we were originally planned, it would have been a smaller gathering, people on bigger tables, and people could have heard. Yeah. Just to stand up and shout this, I'd like it just for perhaps Eric can put it in a round robin just to say that it's my thought about keeping us going. That's all. And I think it would be inappropriate. It may well be at a later date we can do it, but up to the now, as we're coming to the end of this lockdown, and as Dick said, perhaps and hopefully on July the 29th, July the 19th, we can be much freer to join together, be closer together and talk together, and particularly in the bars.
That's fine, Bill. I must say that during that lunch, it's not traditional that anybody gives a talk or anything, really. But on this particular occasion, I'm afraid that I have got to just spend, say, 5 minutes, no more, but right at the beginning of the lunch, I've got to say a few words.
Yeah.
So,
And I have to say the other thing, Stuart, we always have the grace, because I've actually said it in the past. So it's, but other than that, I understand that you have to say something about escaping and all the rest of it.
yeah, okay, all right. So, so we'll have that 5 minutes before the lunch, just to say a few things. Terry.
Yeah, just a quick word. I know I'm speaking to the converted, looking at the faces in front of me. The Shuttleworth trip at the moment, as far as I'm concerned, is still on. And I will get some further details out shortly. I am liaising with Ian, obviously, for the money side. But if you do know of anybody else who might be interested, particularly from Probus, we could always do with a couple more. To help pay for it. The minimum is 10, and we're almost there. And but I would like to push and get a couple more so we can be over the sort of artificial limit. Thanks.
Can they be guests?
Yes.
As far as I'm concerned, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Bert Brooks said he wanted to come, Terry, so he's probably not getting in touch with you yet, but I think Bert will come as well. He's asking me about a lift, so.
We've got another 4 weeks, Terry, so I'm sure we can push that in the next round robin.
Yeah. Well, we haven't in many ways because I have to pay for it a fortnight before we go.
Okay, understood. Right. Okay, gents, I think that's the morning. It's good to see you all. Thanks.
Yeah, and you.
And you.
Look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you,
Let's get
Stuart.
back to my quiz then.
Okay.
Cheers.
Cheerio then. Bye.
Bye, folks.